When I was really young, I read a book on euthanasia, which is a procedure for assisted suicide or death, which is accompanied by ingesting a substance that essentially is a drug that enables your body um, to stop your heart from beating via the digestive system. And also, people usually accompany you as the patient if you were to decide to participate. Now, many people with terminal illnesses choose this option, and in most countries, in my opinion, if I remember correctly, assisted euthanasia is possible for terminal patients or patients with terminal illnesses that are very hard to manage or cure or heal. And there is an option for patients with mental illnesses as well. So a patient does not necessarily have to use this option if they only have a mental illness, but they definitely can. But the criteria for them to participate may be more complicated and complex and higher in general. So there may be more requirements going into the procedure. If a patient comes with multiple diagnoses or symptomatic problems or issues with their health, they are, examined separately from all other cases. But generally, if you send in your need to want to participate, you will be given a bunch of documents basically, and you will be given the option to send in those documents with your data, documents such as birth certificate, your place of residence, some document that is proof of your current residence, your data right now that is some very, very specific data to identify you. And after that, you will be called in for health examination. You will be accompanied by a doctor, and the local doctor will tell and evaluate you about your problem. The doctor will evaluate your problem and tell you about it. And if they consider your problem as something that is not as serious, for example, you may need to have a more profound reason or more like a heavier reason to participate. They do not necessarily accept patients just because they have one single diagnosis that they have been having for like a few years, and then all of a sudden they decide to end their lives. Usually there has to be unbearable pain of any kind, and that is the most important criteria. Sometimes that pain can extend to one that is something that prevents sleeping, or sleep quality from occurring, or good sleep in general. And if that is not the case, the pain must be like easy to feel most of the time. Now, again, there are specific countries, states, and places in the world where you can participate in assisted euthanasia despite having not a terminal illness. So there is definitely the option, but you definitely need the diagnosis. In most places, if you do not have a very heavy reasons such as terminal illness, you will definitely need to bring with yourself at least a few next of kin or family members, to just make sure that everything goes well and is planned, and for the company and the institution to make sure that you are basically a real person, supported in doing this, and you are not, opposing your own environment by ending your own life, essentially. But generally, the topic of, assisted euthanasia is very diverse, and it tends to share people in terms of, some people being against it, some people being for it, because suicide in general and ending one's life in general is a very almost a taboo topic, but it is being discussed and debated around the world more and more, to my satisfaction, actually, because I have been one of those people who has been raised Christian, very strict, and completely opposing the idea of, even talking about ending a life. And, most endings in my life were deemed as failures. But many people, when they realize that they have such an option as to, commit suicide legally and via supported means, they may realize that indeed they can fail. And so what they decide is that because they have choice now, because they realize that they have choice now, they retreat, because they find the idea too daunting, or they just are not ready for it. But the idea of having no option to even quote unquote fail or create an ending in one's life is definitely what creates many oppositions and obstacles and resistance in general. And so people definitely turn to suicide on their own and alone, completely by themselves, often because they have been alienated from the idea that they have a right to choose their path or how their life ends, and how it even happens. Because most of us are taught, not to get too philosophical here, but I think it is important to mention that most of us are taught in a way where we think that we must have something to die for. And I have been one of those people who has been trying really hard to die for something, but I realized in all those years I really lived. And just by having chosen something to really live for instead, I would have saved myself much more heartache and headache and even body ache, because it came with injury, it came with heartbreak, and it came with mental loss, honestly. And the net result is something that I would not assume that everyone would benefit from or think it is worth it, because again, I was living something to die for, and I didn't even know what I was doing. Honestly, I was just doing what everyone was doing, which was to avoid death, not ignore it, avoid it with force and treat it as taboo, but yet not having anything specific or particular to live for, such as a family or, a life purpose that is very specific for me or to me in masculine containment. Now, another option for ending one's life is, of course, as I have mentioned, committing suicide by oneself. But the thing about this is that this is more controversial than even sparsely legally discussed topics such as euthanasia, because suicide is, a very individual decision, the same way that giving birth for a woman or getting pregnant for a woman is, because it is life and death. The decision is about life and death, and the decision can lead to major consequences, especially if done wrong, or if the act turns sideways or goes awry, and the patient survives, or the person survives, and then the environment has to deal with them for the rest of their lives. So it's like very complicated, but the people who are no longer with us due to suicide, we cannot talk to anymore. So we do not know what they went through and what they did to end their lives specifically. But one thing we do know is that they thought that they would be relieved enough from doing so that ending their lives is more worth it than living it. And I do believe that we could prevent a lot of, endings that are actually failures because of a personal story, by just not demonizing something that is so natural and so, actually close to us. And what we do is instead is we just ignore it in all the distractions that we are faced each day, but it is still there. People, when they do something like that, they do not think about anything but themselves. But the truth is that we always can give back to others if we have something to give from. And by filling our cup first, we get to share what is in our cup in the first place. And if we have nothing to give, I would completely understand someone to have the intention to be as selfish as ending their own life, because they feel like they are in a catch-22 and they cannot catch up to themselves and the world. So, if I had no option to do euthanasia, because either I could not find sponsorship or physical support or dignity, even, I would consider no longer eating food or no longer drinking water, although these things can take multiple weeks and they are really strenuous on the body, and they take active participation and commitment and consistency. So they do take a lot of discipline. But once done, of course, they can be lethal as well. The third option is one that I will not share here because it is, I think, too easy for most people. And I'm not talking about using guns or weapons at all, because these things in many countries around the world require a license or, a permit to be used. Unlike in the US, which is widely known for a widespread usage of these devices or weapons. So weapons may not be accessed by anyone, and that's just a fact. And they should not be used by just anyone. But, ingesting or using chemical compounds that physically harm the body, I don't think is good either. Again, because they are highly risky or generally just very, I would say, not as trustworthy as even euthanasia or, no longer consuming anything. But the truth is that death will generally always come with a loss, and we will eventually all reach it. And that is why it is so natural and close to us, is because our short lives contain only so many experiences, and whatever we get to live through our lives and through our lifetime is only ours. And when we leave this earth, we will be remembered or we will be forgotten, but our valuable lives, since they are only so long, they mean a lot to us, but in the greater picture, it is really just a thought that we exist. So when people say do not take yourself so seriously, I completely agree with them. But on the other hand, when people say do take yourself seriously, I also agree with them, because I have lived through both of these beliefs fully, and I can completely wholeheartedly express that playing or having fun as much as working or taking responsibility or standing up for yourself or others can be just as meaningful as the other. So they can be meaningful both, and this is why I'm making this video. It is because I do not want to all of this information flawed that we are faced with every day. I do not want to distract people from what matters to them, but I also want to kind of give them kind of a little bit of hope that there is an option to fail. Because if there is not, as Elon Musk once said, things might go backwards if, push comes to shove and we do not maintain them. So, I know I'm not alone, because there are even forums on the internet about the topic, and I see the internet going kind of wild in terms of content, and I think just by me talking about this, I get to kind of normalize just becoming aware and conscious, because our thoughts matter almost the same way that our actions and emotions matter. And even if like, just because we do not talk about something, we still think those things, and if we do, we impact everything that is around us and us first and foremost. So by just limiting ourselves to talk about certain things, we do not get rid of them, we do not ignore them, we do not leave them behind. Then we can only process through it and integrate those beliefs or disbeliefs by talking about them and bringing them into the light. So I really hope that this video brought something to the light for you, and that it kind of opened your eyes a little bit.